across the county we hear them calling from every corner of this fair land. The women who built this world of ours, the women who built this world with science, technology, medicine, engineering, maths, with courage and fortitude, endurance and attitude. We'll follow the echoes from Essex. We're proud of the triumphs in Essex. We'll fight like the women of Essex to build a new dawn.
Hello, I'm Ian Knowles, the Artistic Director and Theatre Manager here at Chelmsford City Theatres. Welcome to the digital version of Chelmsford Civic Theatre. And welcome to this, the fourth of our online Zoom performances as part of Essex 2020 in partnership with the amazing Electric Voice Theatre and Essex Music Education Hub. As always, welcome back to everyone who joined us last week, and hello to anyone new joining us tonight. For tonight's performance, please look at the chat notes on how to pin the live BSL sign language interpreter video to your screen for people wishing to follow the signing of this event, and also look at the chat notes for any other technical issues. There will be a question and answer session after the performance tonight, so if you have any questions for any of our artists and experts, please send them to everyone in the chat box. As in the live theatre, please put your mobile phones on silent, and please turn your computer microphone and camera off. Otherwise you will be filmed and we will hear you, and we will also see everything that we really don't wish to. Do feel free, however, at the end of the performance to put your microphones back on and applaud our artists and experts, which I'm sure you will want to do tonight. For tonight's performance of Soundings 4, Gulielma, Leytonstone's world expert on fungi, our artists and experts are Artistic Director, Composer, Soprano from Electric Voice Theatre, Francis Lynch, Production Manager and Sound Designer, Herbie Clark, British Sign Language Interpreter, Lauren Lister, Mezzo-soprano, Simone Ibbett-Brown. Taking care of us from Chelmsford Theatre's marketing team are Victoria, Alex and Becca. Our resident expert, Dr. Patricia Fara, science historian, fellow of Clare College, Cambridge. And this week, our scientific expert is from the world-famous Natural History Museum in London, Dr. Gothamie Weerakoon, Senior Curator of Lichens and Slime Moulds. After the performance, we open our virtual bar to you, our audience. Our experts and performers can respond to any questions you may wish to put to them. And so now, turning to tonight's performance, please welcome to the virtual Civic Theatre stage from the amazing Electric Voice Theatre, Francis Lynch, as we travel back in time and explore the extraordinary world of fungi.
And what better way to start exploring the world of fungi than with a piece of music? This piece is going to be by Imogen Holst. She's one of those early 20th century composers whose music captured the landscape of the English countryside through its own folk dance and culture. In this May Day carol that we're going to hear, her voice speaks clearly of the joy of both of the music and of the world it depicts. And it gives us an insight into the outdoor life of the woman whose life we're celebrating tonight, Gulielma Lister. There's a sense of the family and friends going out together and constantly learning about their environment and delighting in what they found. It's a strong background on which to place the dedicated, detailed work that led Lister to become a world expert in her field. Shortly, we'll hear more about her from science historian Dr. Patricia Fara, Emeritus Fellow of Clare College, Cambridge, who's worked tirelessly to discover not just these women from Essex, but women from all over the UK who we've been featuring in our Minerva Scientifica Echoes project all over the UK for the last 6 years. So, first of all, the promised introduction to Gulielma Lister. As the electric voice satyr singers begin to sing Imogen Holst's May Day carol, The Hedges and Fields. The singers tonight are Jenny Miller, Margaret Cameron and Alice Privet. And it's an arrangement by Imogen from a collected song at the English Folk Dance and Song Society, one of 20 traditional British folk songs for unaccompanied voices, written in 1967.
The hedges and fields are clothed in green as the early leaf. Our Heavenly Father waters them with His morning dew so sweet. Now we've been rambling all the night and some part of the day, and as we're returning back again, we've brought you a bunch of May. A bunch of May we've brought you here, and at your door it shall stand. It is not a sprout, but it's well budded out by the works of our dear Lord's hand. My song it is sung, and we must be gone. No longer can we stay. God bless you all, both great and small, and we wish you a joyful May.
Gulielma Lister, known as Guli to her friends, lived her entire life in Leytonstone. For mycologists who study fungi, she's the equivalent of Isaac Newton in physics. She was nearly 90 when she died in Sycamore House, the place where she was born. And if you've ever been to the Walnut Tree pub in Leytonstone, you'll recognise this tribute to her on the left. And there she is as well on the right, surrounded by roses in front of her lifelong home. It was demolished in the 1950s, and it's now the site of the Welsh Church. You can see from this census form of 1911 that she was living there with her elder sister and 6 servants. But she was definitely not the sort of person who stays at home the whole time. She worked in Paris and Edinburgh and Switzerland and London, and every summer she spent several weeks in LYME REGIS. And in the early 20th century, all that travelling was quite unusual for a single woman. She was once celebrated as the Queen of Slime Moulds, which might not sound a very appealing title, but slime moulds are more beautiful and more interesting than their name suggests. These are just 2 of the 900 different species that are found throughout the world. Working from her base in Leytonstone, Gulielma Lister became an international expert. One person who shared this fascination was the Emperor of Japan. She named a specimen after him, and he sent her this fine pair of enamelled vases to thank her. Only a few photos of her survive, and it's difficult to know what sort of person she was. She came from a long line of distinguished Quakers, and many people remembered her as being generous and self-effacing. But female colleagues were often overawed by her perfectionism and high standards. And many people found it difficult to accept that a woman could be a professional scientist. It was such an unusual career choice. One woman, Cataly, described her as
Gulielma Lister! Oh, goodness, a horsey sort of man!
But there were far more comments like this one, which was said by a female botanist.
A tall, slender, handsome, dignified, but gracious and so kind. A perfect gentlewoman with an old-world courtesy.
She was extremely close to her family, which included eminent scientists in several generations. Her grandparents, Joseph Jackson and Isabella Lister, originally came from Yorkshire, but they moved to Upton in Essex in 1825. And you can see her grandmother is wearing a Quaker bonnet. This Quaker identity was very important for the Listers, and in their private letters, they addressed each other as thou and thee. But they were discriminated against. The men were banned from attending traditional universities, which insisted that students should be Anglican. Joseph Jackson accumulated a considerable fortune as a wine merchant, but what he loved most was microscopy, and he was elected a Fellow of the Royal Society. And he encouraged his children to study science as well. One of them, Gulielma's uncle, was the famous surgeon Joseph Lister, who celebrated for bringing antisepsis into operating theatres and making surgery far less dangerous than it had been before. When he was made a baron, he chose the title Lord Lister of LYME Regis, which is where he spent the summers with Gulielma and the rest of their family. Like Gulielma, he was a keen botanist, and this sketchbook is from one of his field trips. With Gulielma, he made a collection of 250 dried plants called a herbarium. This included 100 from Essex and is preserved in the archives of the Essex Field Club. And here is her father with his 7 children. Gulielma's in the middle, wearing a white dress. Unlike her grandfather, her father Arthur ran a wine business and was passionate about science and became a Fellow of the Royal Society. He was able to make very high quality observations by using the special microscope lenses that his father had invented. Gulielma's mother, Susanna, was the daughter of a ship owner and a skilled artist who taught her children how to draw and paint. Gulielma Lister clearly benefited from her instruction, as she was an excellent scientific illustrator. Apart from a year at Bedford College when she was 16, she was educated at home by a governess and her parents. She regularly met her cousins and other relatives because several family members clubbed together to buy a large house perched on the cliff tops in LYME Regis. They went to Highcliffe House every summer. There's a modern photo on the left, and on the right, you can see it from the back in 1924. Eventually, her parents moved in permanently, while she stayed in Leytonstone with 2 of her sisters. The house was set in extensive grounds, and its location was ideal for a family that was so interested in botany. Gulielma Lister described the walled garden, a thatched summer house, a gazebo, and a pigsty. And this is her watercolour sketch of the bay, with geological notes attached to it. She compiled a large scrapbook, which she called her Thesaurus. It included postcards and drawings, and you can see part of her index on the right. So her photo of the Esplanade from around 1890 shows the type of clothes she would have worn. And here's her hand-drawn copy of a local map. But Gulielma and her family weren't indulging themselves in long, relaxed holidays. They studied hard the whole time. She constantly went walking, sketching, bird watching, and was inseparable from her pocket telescope. The family worked so hard that they invented a new word for it, ruggling on. Her father set up a laboratory packed with equipment for them to study mosses, fungi, lichens, and slime moulds, what he called their living creepies.
Oh, we'll go this day a-ruggling, a-ruggling, a-ruggling. We'll go this day a-ruggling on. There's fungi and lichen and slime moulds to find, that we are all for collecting inclined, and birds to watch in the sycamore tree, and sketches to make of the plants that we see all around the walnut tree. The queen of slime moulds forever I will be. Sorry, Patricia, did I interrupt you? I was just working on this little song about Gulielma Lister, but I do go on. I need to finish it.
So Gulielma Lister worked closely with her father on his definitive book about slime moulds. But she was also an independent researcher, and after he died, she published revised editions of his book. I've highlighted her name with the arrow. The original book only contained black and white line drawings, but her edition included her own wonderful coloured illustrations, and these are just 4 of them. She established an international reputation as a first-class researcher and illustrator, and she played a prominent role in biological societies. In 1904, she was one of the first 15 women elected as fellows of London's prestigious Linnean Society. And later on, she became vice president. This is what a meeting looked like the year after she joined. A younger woman remembered being very impressed by the way Gulielma Lister insisted on taking off her hat during meetings to protest for gender equality. She wanted to show that she was first and foremost a scientist, not a genteel lady. You can see here that all the women seem to have followed her example.
Open your eyes to the blaze of the day. Shout, shout, shout.
She was also a very keen member of the British Mycological Society, and she was twice elected their president. Mycologists study fungi, such as mushrooms and toadstools, which were traditionally regarded as plants. And her speciality was slime moulds, which can range in size from a few centimetres up to several square metres. They used to be classed as fungi, but scientific opinion has changed. They're very strange organisms that exhibit characteristics of both plants and animals. Slime mould is a general label that groups together several different types. The extraordinary thing about some of them is that they can exist as single-celled organisms, but they can also behave collectively and swarm from place to place as they grow. Mysteriously, they seem to act like some sort of animal brain collaborating to make decisions. Modern scientists are becoming increasingly interested in slime moulds. As a world expert, she worked on major collections at London's Natural History Museum, as well as other important institutions in France and Switzerland. And you can see here a card that she sent to the museum. but she was also very committed to Essex and often carried out botanical research locally. She compiled a list of 300 different plants in Wanstead Park, each one meticulously recorded and labelled. She was an enthusiastic member of the Essex Field Club. On the left is a paper she wrote called The Water Violet in Epping Forest.
It sounds so dull, doesn't it? Calling it a paper, like a scientific paper. When the language she uses is so beautiful. I'll read you a bit of it. She begins with quite a personal statement. It goes, "The frontispiece to the present volume of the Essex Naturalist is a reproduction of a watercolour sketch by my sister, the late Isabella S. Lister. It represents a colony of the water violet, Houghtonia palustris, growing in one of the Epping Forest ponds, and was painted about 1890 in early summer when the plant was in full flower. The pond is screened on one side by oaks and low hornbeams. It is one of a group of small gravel pit ponds in which most of the Houghtonia flourished at that time. Throughout the year, its rosettes of rich green pectinate foliage could be seen through the clear water, while in summer grew up the tall scapes bearing many whorls of pale mauve primula-like flowers. When we see how the growth of Greater London, and this is a statement that could really apply now, is continually encroaching on the habitats of our wildflowers, we may well be thankful that Epping Forest provides a sanctuary where such a plant as the water violet is able to survive. It's beautiful, isn't it?
It is, you're right. She was president from 1916 to 19, and she contributed a huge collection of specimens and papers to their archives where they're all carefully preserved. For example, these are her drawings of a seawort which grows on rocky and shingly shores. And here's a flowering almond. When I started this project, I hadn't even heard of Gulielma Lister, but now I've discovered how fascinating she is, I'm not surprised that I've met many people interested in preserving her memory. And among those I'd especially like to thank are David Boot and Maureen Measure of the Leytonstone Historical Society, Richard Bull of the LYME REGIS Museum, Paul Ferris of Wanstead Wildlife, and William George of the Essex Field Club. Throughout her life, even after her death, Gulielma Lister remained close to Essex and her family. At her own request, her ashes were scattered over her mother's grave in the garden of the Quakers' Friends Meeting House, where this stone commemorates Gulielma and one of her sisters, Edith.
I cannot tell why, but the rustling of grass as the summer winds pass through the fields where I lie brings to light a lost day long ago, far away, when in childhood I lay looking up at the sky and the white clouds that pass, trailing isles of grey shadow across the gold grass. Oh, the dreams that drift by with the slow flowing years, the dreams that drift by with the
The Rustling of Grass. Beautiful song sung there by Simone Ibbett-Brown. And Avril Coleridge-Taylor was a composer, and she was a conductor and pianist who, like Lister, caught her enthusiasm and dedication for her life's work from her father, in this case, composer Samuel Coleridge-Taylor. Her song, The Rustling of Grass, marks the end of Dr. Fara's biographical investigation of Gulielma Lister, but there's more to come of the legacy of her work, which continues through that of many mycologists worldwide, including in the collections she studied at the Natural History Museum, which are still there and ably looked after by Dr. Gothamie Weerakoon, who is Senior Curator of Lichens and Slime Moulds at the Natural History Museum of London. And we're very lucky to have her with us today because she's not in London. She's actually with her family on the east coast of the United States of America. And I think, if I'm right in saying so, that you are indeed there.
Yes, I am. Thank you, Frances. So I am the Senior Curator of Lichens and Slime Moulds at the Natural History Museum, as introduced by Frances. I could be the first South Asian woman scientist to hold a Senior Curator position at the Department of Cryptogamy at our museum. My research interests are focused on the taxonomy and ecology of tropical lichens, bioindication and conservation of lichenized fungi in endangered habitats. My main responsibility as the Senior Curator of British, General and Historical Herbaria is to manage and develop one of the world's largest lichen and slime mold collection with 450,000 specimens. I am interested in making the collections available for both scientific and historical research. I completed my bachelor's and master's degree in Sri Lanka and obtained my PhD by conducting research at the Natural History Museum, London. After that, I spent 5 years in America as a postdoctoral researcher at the Field Museum of Chicago and funded by the National Geographic Society. Most of my fieldwork was conducted in South and Southeast Asia, observing lichens in their native habitats. I am a taxonomist and have described many new lichen species so far, mostly in lichen family Graphidaceae from the Old World tropics. Currently, I supervise master's, MPhil and PhD students in UK, Sri Lanka and Pakistan. I serve as a research consultant on collaborative projects conducted in UK, Scotland, Germany, Netherlands, and also Far East Asian countries such as Vietnam, India, Nepal, Bhutan, Thailand, and China. My current research projects involve a monograph of Graphis, the most specious genus in Asia, IUCN red listing of threatened lichens in the world, collaborative research in renewable sources of bioactive products from endolichenic fungi in mangrove ecosystems of Asia, ecological relationships and bioindication of lichens, using lichen as indicator to monitor nitrogen pollution in the world. I first came across Miss Lister while I was reading for my PhD. Details of her work was on the book chapter of Introduction to the History of Mycology. She was known as Queen of Slime Mold, so I became so interested to read her publications. They were inspirational for me. Slime molds are not true fungi or plants. They are protozoa. However, they have been studied by mycologists in the past as their sporing structures recall some fungal ones. Slime molds, they eat by ingesting food, like enveloping and drawing particles, especially they eat bacterial cells. while fungi eat by absorbing dissolved food by secreting enzymes that break them down. So modern science have separated them into two different kingdoms now. Miss Lister's collection of slime molds with beautiful drawings and annotations are deposited in our museum. It is one of the historically important collections held at our museum. Former lichen curator, Dr. Holger, and one of the librarian, Andrea, were very much involved with this publication collections. So as a result, 2 of her illustrations were recently published on the book of Women Scientific Illustrators, published by our museum. She's also famous for collecting lichen, Pseudocephalaria aurata especially, on LYME REGIS underclips in her area. Probably they were collected during she collected slime molds. However, this particular lichen species is now extinct. Very sad. Miss Lister was a true slime mold taxonomist. We only had very few women who were taxonomists in historical mycological world. She was the honorary curator of the British Museum of Mezzo-soprano. Taxonomy has become fashion of my life. I'm fascinated about Miss Lister's annotations and lavish illustrations. I followed her footsteps and became the senior curator at the museum. Miss Lister did a lot of field work and described many new slime molds. I worked a lot in the field, especially exploring hidden habitats in Asia, hunting for unknown species. It helps me to describe new species to science. So far, I have described 130 new lichen species. I'm not an illustrator like Miss Lister though, but make macro photographs in the field. Miss Lister's illustrations were part of her descriptions and publications. Likewise, I use colorful macro photographs in new species descriptions. Miss Lister had a very strong correspondence with fellow scientists who were in the same field. We, mycologists today, are part of a worldwide network and we work together. Especially, it is essential that we work together to deal with the taxonomy. We need each other's expertise. Miss Lister is a role model. She is followed by many women in mycological sciences today. She herself is truly a queen in her century.
Oh, we'll go this day a-ruggling, we'll go this day a-ruggling on. Within the walled garden, we pick flowers when we can, to display in a vase from the Emperor of Japan. Upon the thatch there are specimens to catch. All around us are species of living creepies, and I'm sure you'll agree, all around the walnut tree, the queen of slime mold forever I will be, the queen of slime mold forever I will be. So Gothamie, I'm just been working on this little song, which is actually for the virtual choir. They don't know about it yet, so don't tell them. That I'm going to do a little bit of that with them, and it really at the moment just describes the things that I wanted to bring out from her life, not so much her work. So these are the bits of the story that resonate with me as a musician and a singer, and I wondered how they might what from her story resonates with you as a scientist, and also with Patricia as a historian, so looking at it from different perspectives.
Gothamie, you go first.
Okay, so Frances, so she being a taxonomist in that era where male dominant science was so much dealing with challenges of taxonomy, going in the field, collecting slime molds, not only in Essex and UK, but all around Europe maybe. And we have evidence that how far she has traveled and worked and how she was connected with others. I think that's fascinating. That's fascinating in that century, 18th century. We are talking about a woman taxonomist in 18th century. So that is the thing that I like about her most.
So I've come across a lot of women in the 19th and 20th century who were effectively doing a man's work. But what I really relish about Gulielma Lister is that she was so energetic, and she was just so absorbed in her work, and she never stopped. She just focused and concentrated the whole time. But she also remembered to mentor younger women, and I think that's a very important part of being a female scientist as well.
Yeah, I just wondered as well, because, you know, her path into science was clearly through her family. I mean, you know, her dad was very much into botany. Her grandfather before, I think, were they fellows of the Royal Society, Patricia? Is that right?
Oh, there weren't any women fellows of the Royal Society.
No, I mean her father and grandfather.
Her father and her grandfather were. Yeah, and I think if you think about all the women that we've done so far, very, very different from the next two women that we're going to do, but the four women we've discussed so far have all come from relatively wealthy families.
Yeah.
Margaret Cavendish was really rich. But if you wanted to do science, you had to have the money to support yourself. You weren't going to earn anything. And there was Gulielma Lister living in this huge house in Leytonstone with, was it 5 or 6 servants, and you know, living basically off her family's wine business. You needed to be in that position if you wanted to do science, and I think that's something that's increasingly changed during the 20th century.
Yes. Well, so did you get your science from your father, Gothamie?
Yes, he was my hero, because growing in Sri Lanka and you know, surrounded by a lot of cultural barriers. So I had to kind of swim upstream, Frances. So it was not an easy race, jumping over all the hurdles I had. But he was an army officer. So he accepted me in my pants and shorts with my short hair. So I was kind of a black sheep in the herd of the family. So I think my father supported me throughout my career.
So my father was a lawyer, and he always discouraged me from studying law, because he said, if you do, you're very much restricted to the particular country that you trained in. And what he said was that science was international. And if he said to me, if you become a scientist, then you can settle wherever you want to in the whole world.
You've certainly done that, Gothamie, haven't you? You travel a lot for your work, right?
Yes, I have to travel a lot for my work, because most of the lichens what we have in the Western world, they are very well documented. So, but we have lots of unexplored places in unknown tropics and old world tropics. So I travel a lot hunting for these species. I think it has become part of my life now. And I really enjoy it.
It sounds like, actually, I mean, I can't imagine, but I mean, the kind of places you were talking about going, right? You have to be pretty strong and, you know, very outdoorsy, I would say, to do your kind of a job. And people think of scientists, they don't necessarily think, I mean, you know, you have that wonderful picture of you both in the Natural History Museum looking at the collection and then climbing a tree. You know, which do you prefer?
Frances, very honestly, I like to be outdoor. Climbing trees is more fun than looking at the lichens through the microscope, but it is essential for my work and also for publications, introducing these unknown species to scientific world and also to general public. So that is my job, but personally, I'm an outdoor creature.
Well, that sounds much more exciting than my life. I'm a historian, so of course I spend a lot of my time in the library poking around books, although I can't do that now because of COVID. So your life sounds much more exciting than mine.
Yeah.
So Patricia, I'm a lucky one then?
Absolutely,
I
absolutely.
think you are, yes.
You made a good choice. It's not I don't think that it's you're lucky. I think it's that you worked extremely hard, and like Gulielma Lister, you were very determined to achieve well and to get to the top. I think from what I've heard about you, you've overcome a huge number of obstacles. Yeah. And I hope that your example will encourage any young women in Essex who are watching this, will encourage them to become scientists as well.
It's a pleasure to hear it from you. Thank you.
Yeah. But what I was kind of interested to know that, you know, I was just sort of thinking you were talking about you had to overcome all sorts of cultural barriers, but you know, presumably once you got into the profession, you must have also encountered some discrimination for just being a woman.
Yes, indeed. It was sad to face such experiences. I've been given weird eye, and people didn't accept me, especially it is because I'm coming from a Far East Asian country, having brown skin, lots of things. But women are strong. They make it a challenge. I think I made it a life experience to become more stronger and stand on my feet. And I thought, okay, more obstacles, it means that I have to achieve my goals, no matter what it happens. So I think we women are more stronger in those kind of situations.
Yeah, I think you're I think you're definitely someone that people will remember very clearly for being very inspirational. I hope your story is has things written about it in the way that Gulielma Lister's has, because I think it deserves a book. There's a book there. You're going to write your autobiography.
Maybe when I retire from the lichens and slime molds.
When you have to stop climbing trees.
When I can't climb trees anymore.
Yes, so the Patricia's offering to give you a hand. There you go.
I heard a wonderful story today about a senior woman in one of our major universities, and she said, we don't have to worry about unconscious bias anymore. I've got a top job and I earn 186,000 a year. The problem is totally sorted. If only that were true. I mean, it's absolutely extraordinary that a senior woman can make that statement, because there still are a lot of problems confronting women in science, I think.
Yes, there are. And I hope that, you know, you coming and talking to us today as well, Gothamie, and looking at the connections, you know, how important Lister was in your field. I mean, you know, this is a worldwide field, as you said, and, you know, just kind of celebrating her. And we've been celebrating other women from Essex, as Patricia mentioned, Margaret Cavendish, who was a natural philosopher from Colchester, 17th century, and Elizabeth Tollet, a mathematical poet, and Ellen Wilmot, who was last week's, who's a horticulturist. And the idea of science and arts is a very important one, clearly, to us, because our project is kind of, you know, trying to encompass that and show how creative people like you yourself are as well. You have to be creative to be a scientist, right? So, you know, just thinking about Elizabeth Tollet and that poetry brings me to the final piece of music of the evening, which is just about remembrance. So it's really that we want to try and remember people. Now, this is based on Christina Rossetti's poem, which exhorts us to forget and smile. But I think that really we should be remembering, and I'm sure we will remember these women, and remember to smile about them too. Remember, remember me, remember, remember me when I'm gone.
than that you should.